Everyone, today's January 14th. This is the Salina City Commission meeting. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley.
Would those that are able please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Thank you. We start our meeting with the Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for any citizen with a concern or a comment to come to the Commission and state your name, address, and whatever issue you would like to talk about that is not a part of today's agenda.
Your Honor and Commissioners, Dennis Lauber from the Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to introduce to you Beth Shelton, who joins our team today as Project Manager of Economic Development. Beth joins us from the Wichita Economic Development Corporation, and we look forward to her working with all of us in this room. And later in the month, she'll take her certification test and become a certified economic developer as recognized by the International Economic Development Council.
Excellent. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Any other issues from citizens? Seeing none, we'll move to awards and proclamations.
The day of January 21st, 2013 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Day in the city of Salina. Aaliyah Banton will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Aaliyah Banton. Today I will be reading to you guys the proclamation. Proclamation. Honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 2013. Whereas the 21st day of January is the birthday and anniversary of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And whereas Dr. King stood before the entire world as a man of peace, champion of human dignity, and an example of love and brotherhood. And whereas the citizens of Salina do recognize Dr. King's contribution to all good of humankind, and they do desire to perpetuate and implement the ideals expressed in his dream and peace and harmony among all God's children. Now therefore, I, Norm Jennings, Mayor, City of Salina, do hereby proclaim the day of January 21st, 2013, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Commemoration Day, and urge that every citizen of Salina join in extending recognition and honor to the memory of this great leader of humankind. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of City of Salina, Kansas to be affixed this day, January 7, 2013. Norm Jennings, Mayor, City of Salina.
So tell us what all activities you have planned.
Okay, let's see. On January 17th, there's a presentation at 7 o'clock at Smoky Hill Museum, and it is on 211 West Iron in the community room. As well as on the January 19th, there is a film screening and discussion at 2 o'clock p.m., and the film will be The Help. And then also on January 20th, there are two activities. There is the Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration at 3:30 p.m. at Grand Avenue United Methodist Church. And then there's also an open mic and poetry series, and that is at 7:30 p.m.
Excellent. Anything else?
I also have calendars for you guys and buttons.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks. Thank you.
And I have a signed copy of your proclamation.
Thank you.
Today we do not have any public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time, so that moves us into the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of January 7th, 2013. Item 6.2, Resolution Number 136970, appointing members to the Building Advisory Board, Heritage Commission, Human Relations Commission, Salina Economic Development Incentives Council, and the Salina-Saline County Solid Waste Management Committee. Item 6.3, award of contract for the water treatment plant capital maintenance improvements, project number 132958, to Walters Morgan Construction Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $188,452. Item 6.4, authorize the purchase of 2 rotary mowers and 1 reel mower from Professional Turf Products LP in the amount of $121,975.99. Item 6.5 has been removed from the agenda. Item 6.6, resolution number 136968, adopting the Parks and Recreation revenue and pricing policy. Item 6.7, resolution number 13-6973, authorizing the purchase of a wellness fair services from ComCare.
Are there any items that a commissioner has a question on or would like pulled from the consent agenda?
I just have a question on 6.7 for either Ms. Fisher or Mr. Gage. Are these services that will be offered at the health fair, are those services that are not otherwise covered by our employees' health insurance coverage?
Natalie can probably answer that a little bit better than me, but generally speaking, yes, and how the information is provided to us is probably the most, in aggregate, is probably the most important thing.
Right. When we do purchase the services from ComCare, as we have over the last few years, one of the benefits of having it all done at a particular time, in addition to the benchmarking, is it is in a report, whereas some individuals may be able to go get those things done. They may have variable costs depending on the method that they get to receive those, but they might not be done. It's not that we get all of the information done at one time, and we don't have anything that requires individuals to get them all done at a certain point in time. Does that answer the question?
My question is, are we ending up paying for this twice? If they can go and get this information and get these tests done under their health insurance coverage, why don't we just do it that way instead of paying the additional money to have it done separately instead of under their health insurance?
For example, like if someone has had a blood screening done within a certain period of time, we are prepared to not have them duplicate that and pay for it again. We would say if it's been done in an X amount of time to where it will fit into the report and give the same type of snapshot, you know, for what their health is, we won't have them do it over. And we're working with ComCare to determine if it's within a period of time. You know, I guess the best cholesterol screening, the blood screening would be the example. If it's been done within, say, if they determine a 60-day window or a 90-day window is going to give a good representation of having that done, we won't have them go through that again and pay for something they may have just done. Or if someone's able to say, I went to my physician and had this done, can it be included in part of that? We will definitely work with them and not be
I'm not getting to
paying
my
for it.
question.
Okay.
Are you wondering, for example, if cholesterol screening is done
If
here
they-
and also separately?
Can they? Can they, at their
Yes.
annual checkup with their physician under the health insurance provided by the city, have these tests done?
They can have some of them done. I'm not sure about all of them. The real point of this is that as we start thinking about what a wellness program needs to be, we first need to think about how healthy or unhealthy is our organization. So the point of this is to somehow incentivize the folks to come in so we can capture all that information, have it reported to us in aggregate, information that individually we won't be able to see in the other form. We won't ever get to that because we shouldn't, because it needs to be kept confidential. So what this does is give us aggregate information so we could see, you know, for example, do we have a cholesterol problem? Do we have other issues that we need to be aware of? And then we can take that and we can then target in how we want to address our wellness. And that's really what this is for. But some of the things that we offer here are offered through the health insurance program separately, but we don't have the ability to aggregate the information and do anything with it. And that's really what our point is with it.
So do you know what services will be offered at the health fair that are not otherwise covered by their individual health insurance?
Well, I would anticipate, I'll give like the BMI or the blood pressure or those type of screenings. I would anticipate that some of those they may be doing every time they go to see a physician. But I guess
Yeah.
I don't know a way to to say that I would anticipate that every physician should be taking those, but it goes back to what Mr. Gage said. We wouldn't have a means to ever look as a group without identifying information to say, here are the risk factors, here's the pool of individuals that have extremely high blood pressure or maybe at risk for diabetes or some of those other things. So I don't know potentially if we would look at our health plan and say our plan provides for this, or someone's going to pay 20% of it and we pick up 80% of it up, to certain diagnostic levels or whatever. I don't know that we could fairly say that, but this is a means for us to get that information without any information attached to it other than here's what your group looks like that you're currently covering. Trying to think of some of the other diagnostics. Well, the weight, the blood screening is the most intrusive, or I guess the major one.
And then what does the city do with the information? Put pressure on that person to eat differently, to diet, to exercise, to what?
Well, we don't know their names, right? This is just raw
Right.
information.
So why do we need it?
For example, the last few years, we've had about a 25% participation rate out of all of our individuals that we cover. And the areas that we've chosen to provide incentives for or target through our wellness program would be, we know we could lose some weight, we know hypertension is very high, we know the blood pressure should be brought down, and then we're kind of borderline on, in comparing to national averages and then overall best practice averages. Smoking, surprisingly, as a group, we're not as, we don't have as many smokers as many other groups. So we haven't put forward the dollars or any kind of efforts toward the smoking at this point, but we've tried to increase participation in fitness and weight loss and those type of things. So it tells us here's where your risk factors are, and they give us a comprehensive report, again, without any individual names. We may know how many people attended just from the sign-ups, and they were able to substantiate here are the individuals that we've charged for services, but they won't be able to tell us, these individuals need to do this, or these need to do this. It's just the group, and we've been projecting based on 22 to 24% of our group on what, just saying, well, that's the best we have right now. So
Does holding the fair help reduce our premium on our stop loss?
No,
So it
in and
doesn't
of
affect the
itself, no.
cost of that at
Yeah, the real point of it is it costs us over $6 million a year to provide health insurance to our employees, and a net budget of about $72 million. And so healthcare, as you know, grows anywhere from 6 to 10%, sometimes more than that, and that's far more than what our revenue structure grows. So most organizations are out there trying to figure out ways to, you can play with your plan some and all that, but generally speaking, it's about the utilization of the plan. So most organizations who are trying to get a handle on that are trying to benchmark in aggregate, because you can't get individual information, and you shouldn't be able to, but in aggregate, try to benchmark how healthy or unhealthy your organization is and figure out the targets of where the unhealthy aspects are, whether it be cholesterol or some other indicators that they have. And then that helps us tailor a wellness program that we try to apply, and then hopefully we'll be able to tell over a period of maybe a couple of years whether or not we're having an impact on that, if we can create a control group, so to speak. And if we find out no matter what you do you can't change it, then you go back and say, well, it was worth a try, but we can't. If you find out that you can change it and your increase is going down because your folks are a little healthier, that's a good thing, and you keep at it. So really this helps us get the scorecard, the broader scorecard, and so we try to incentivize it to get as much participation as we can. At some point we may be asking you to make it mandatory. If you're going to be in a health plan, you have to do it. We haven't done that yet. We've talked about it. And at some point, we may, simply because healthcare is such a big cost, we may need to do that. But we tried to hold off and just incentivize it at this point.
But we don't even know at this point if it's having any effect on claims or overall health or missed days of work or productivity.
Yeah, and not at this point, because this will be the second
year.
this will be the third year for the health fair.
This is the first year we really have, I would say, a good, solid, organized approach to the wellness impact, incentivized wellness program that you approved not too long ago. In the past, it was we encourage them to do pound plunge and things like that, but this one's more organized. So now we're going to be able to see, is the effort from this year working? Do we need to tinker with the incentives? And as you know, it's about getting people to change lifestyles sometimes, and that's the hardest part, and that's what we're going to try to go after. So we probably won't, we have not been able to comprehensively address that to date. So the answer is no, we cannot tell that it's having an impact yet because we haven't really given ourselves that chance. At the end of this year, we'll have gone through a whole year of a wellness program that's targeted. It's possible we might see some difference. I think we'll need 2 years to really get a pretty good idea of that. But we'll see, because the wellness program is obviously participation-based, and they'll earn credits through participation in various things, and we'll be tracking that participation. And so theoretically, if it shows that we believe that our organization is participating more in physical fitness activities, we should be able to see at some point the outcome with the aggregate testing, even if we don't have everybody in it, if we have a pretty good sample group. So we'll have to see how that goes, and it's kind of a judgment call each year.
Thank you.
No questions on that. I did have a question on 6.5 that we removed. The only thought that came to mind as I was sitting here looking this over, and I didn't.
Can we discuss an item removed?
Technically not.
Well, it's kind of pertinent in the regard that I was thinking my understanding was our ambulance service and all is we have to have someone under contract to do this, correct? And I'm just kind of concerned that if we're not doing this, are we, I mean, I think that's the only reason that the question seems more to be more.
Is it concern about jeopardy without a contract?
Yeah, I mean, can we still run the, I mean, maybe
that.
that's a question for the chief, I don't know. I was thinking we had discussed that before, and we have to have on record a physician. We operate under the physician's license, and I'm just curious, this doesn't run out while we're waiting or anything, does it?
No, the current agreement is still in place.
Okay.
So this would be revisions to the current agreement. But
Okay.
the current agreement would automatically renew unless notice is provided within, I can't remember, 90 days or 120 days. So
Okay.
we're okay with the.
Okay, that was just my concern. I just thought, well, we don't want to be, kind of.
We agree.
Sorry, Salina, we can't come get you. So, okay, I figured we did, but you never know.
Are there any other questions on consent items? Are there any that Commissioner would wish to have pulled from the agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 4-0. We now move into development business.
Item 8.
Excuse me, we have no development business, so we'll move into administration.
Item 8.1, second reading ordinance number 13, 10,670, changing the zoning district classification from PC1 to R1 in the Quail Meadow Estates Edition number 2.
This ordinance number 13-10670 passed on first reading January 7th, and since that time there have been no comments received. Do we have any public comment on this item today? Bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Mayor, I move we adopt on second reading ordinance number 13-10670.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve on second reading ordinance number 13-10670. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. That carries 4-0.
Item 8.2, second reading ordinance number 13, 10,671, changing the zoning district classification on 14 public properties owned by USD 305 to the newly established Public Use Educational Facilities District.
This ordinance number 13-10671 passed on first reading January the 7th. Since that time, there have been no comments. Do we have any public comment at this time? Would you please come forward, state your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name is Christopher Hernandez. I live at 1503 Stapler Avenue. As I've been continuing to learn about the process, we always keep on this. You want to always get right to the point, so I'm going to do that. My concern is that the legislative process was not complete until December 14th, though the quasi-judicial process was initiated December 4th for this particular ordinance. So there was an ordinance of corrective text amendment, that would be 12-10667, that you signed on December 3rd, But then on the signing of it, I have that with me as well. And I'm sorry I was not able to get a packet to you. To be honest, basically, I wasn't even sure if I was going to be here. I have been trying to seek legal advice, counselor, so I wasn't wasting your time, mischaracterizing myself, mischaracterizing you. I did finally get a response from an individual that spoke to what I'm regarding as the process from the Kansas statute requires it to be passed, adopted, and published. So ordinance 12-10667 was passed, was adopted, but was not published until December 14th. Now, all that would have meant is that on the calendar that had the process timelines all spit out for us, to be honest, sir, commissioners, I didn't even see the error. I saw the error not until right before December 3rd, but I was trying to find validation legally if that was right or if that was wrong because of what had happened in the past. So I continued to seek out attorneys, and I was unable to do so. I know that Mrs. Hernandez came last week and just said there was a breaking the law. I don't know what she was referring to specifically because we've been trying to do different things. But the whole thing that I've had since the beginning is the process has to be straight before we pass something this large comprehensively. I mean, we were even doing it, all 14 items, as one ordinance. But I also recognized that last week that you could have pulled different items. And while I considered appearing, I was still consulting for legal advice. I checked everywhere in Salina. I checked even larger cities, Topeka, Hudson, really because I didn't want to be wrong. As I continued to search, I did get validation, and I have an email that indirectly Miss Shirley was spoken to, and I say indirectly, I know she's not here to represent herself, so I have the piece of information with the email. And a congressperson decided they would look into it for me because they got my concern back in November. They were out of the country. They didn't get back into the country until early this week. I presented my information to them, and they were, I guess, astonished and wanted to look into it themselves. So they contacted some people. I already told them what I'd been doing, trying to get an attorney. I contacted legislative research at the Kansas state level, and all I have officially is that the amendment regarding it being passed, adopted, and published has not been repealed. Now, what some attorneys mentioned is that some statutes invalidate other statutes, so I continued to study the Kansas statutes, and I continued to study the city code to see if there was anything I was missing, because I wanted to be sure before I came and stood before you and said that this is an error. And when I originally started this, we all know that since May, it's about getting the process right, especially if this is going to be the major forum where Republicans speak in the future in regards to certain issues. I mean, other issues will go through a lot quicker, and so I want to make sure that the process is done right, because I'm trying to point out that there are sometimes mistakes. I actually studied it today. It would be tort law. When I originally got started, I could have just started accusing individuals of what they had done wrong or omissions that they had made. The Kansas tort law, I was reading that even today to make sure there's like, what am I doing? Am I trying to hurt you guys? Am I trying to help you guys? I want this, if it's going to pass the way it's going to pass, while I'm not happy with it, I understand. I just want to make sure it is legally part of the process. And I mean, I even saw that when you had the packet, I noted that, and I'm sorry, that will be your last week's packet. So I only have the copy that I was sent. Mr. Bingston, which is not his exact words because I know this is a paraphrase, but it was talking about the importance of the process and the integrity of the process. So I was trying to make sure that what happened between December 3rd and December 4th was actually valid. Because then when you passed it last week, that shouldn't have happened, and then we wouldn't even be here today. And I know it wouldn't necessarily fail. I understand it would go back to Planning Commission. They would have to recognize their error that they'd started it again. But it would stop going through this timeline issue of errors happening. Because if you're, like I said, the public's ability to speak to you guys is going to be reduced. And what I mean by reduced is us having the permitted uses and the conditional uses. There will be more permitted uses for the public use district educational facilities if they are to be rezoned, which, while being passed. So while we could speak on some items, I also know that in the future, not you as commissioners, but a new group of commissioners can come in and say, you know what, we'd like to move that particular item that's a conditional use over to a permitted use now that's already a part of our legislation, our city code. And so then there wouldn't be any, it would be different in the way that it's approached, and that the text amendment would be done to where it appear in the paper, in the legal section, but there wouldn't necessarily have to go through that same process as it is doing this time. So it would never be at the Planning Commission level. It would just come straight here, and if someone's looking for that amendment to be changed, they could just move it over, and the public wouldn't see it. And that, to me, is where I feel like there's a less of a checks and balances between the citizens, the city commissioners, and the city staff.
Okay. Now, you mentioned ordinance
I'm sorry.
12-10667.
Yes.
But that's not the ordinance that we have in front of us today. I want to make sure that
Yes, sir.
that there was an understanding of that.
No. I do understand that, but it was pertinent to what we're passing today by either the corrective text amendment passing in the way it did it finish its process? Did it finish its legislative process before it went back under quasi-judicial the very next day?
Okay, that's the nature of your concern.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
Mayor, if you wish, I would be happy to address that now
Certainly,
or at whatever
yeah.
time you might wish.
Yeah, certainly.
And I admire your diligence, Mr. Hernandez. I could have saved you quite a bit of trouble, I think, if you had checked with me. There is, I'm sorry?
I wasn't allowed to.
Why would you say that?
Quasi-judicial process. I mean, even the commissioner, Shirley isn't here, however she was reached, so I could address the concern.
I'm sorry if that became unclear. I am not a decision maker in that process, so I am available at whatever time. That might be useful, but
Okay.
anyway. There's no question but what an ordinance of any kind is not in effect until it has been published. The key distinction here, and I assure you, and when I say possibly saved a little trouble, the sequencing was something that I was aware of and noted as that calendar was laid out. I suppose the key here, I think, is looking at the purpose of the two processes. If you will recall, the rezoning process was underway when there was recognition of the text problem. And interrupt me
That would be the question I have. Does it matter what type of text amendment it is?
as to whether it's effective upon publication or...
Well, just because to me, whenever I studied any of the law, it just said amendment in general. I never saw a specific type of amendment, except when I looked at the city code appropriate amendments.
I think it's a fair conclusion that any ordinance will not be in effect until it has been published. Now, it's fairly recent legislation, as you might be aware. We can now publish by summary
I didn't
rather
notice
than
that.
in full, but it has to be on the city's website if you publish in summary. So it's publicly available in a published format, whether in the newspaper or on the internet, in the form of on the city's website. But I think the key point is that 12-10-667, to which you refer,
The first one, yes, sir.
went into effect on December 14th, the day it was published. I couldn't have told you exactly what day it was published. I
I
didn't know for
looked
sure,
it
but
up.
I'm sure you're right. And I've forgotten which Monday that was.
That was on a Friday.
That was on a Friday. So
Yes,
the
sir.
preceding Monday was when the second reading occurred, if I'm correct.
Got my calendar.
And-
I don't know. I'll pull out my phone. So I
Yeah,
can check.
anyway, I'm sure that was the case. And then we had the Planning Commission meeting that Tuesday, am I correct? And that would have been the renoticed public hearing
Correct.
on the resumed process of the rezonings,
Correct.
correct? Now, the reason I go through all that is that the two very distinct processes we had, and the reason we called the timeout was because we didn't want folks to be in the situation where the rezonings were advancing, but that text problem had not been corrected. It was a notice matter rather than, I mean, we could have rezoned, we could have just kept that process going
Right,
and
I remember you
said,
stating that.
trust us, we'll change the code later or something. Don't worry about it. Well, we thought, no, let's change the text, make sure everybody knows what the text, how it's going to read, and then we'll resume the rezoning process. As a legal matter, I don't believe those two are interrelated. They stand alone, but we chose to introduce the text correction process so that everyone would know what the text, how the text was going to appear in the final analysis. So in my mind, we had achieved that on that Monday when second reading occurred on 10-667. We knew the commission had taken its final action. Even though it's crucial to its effective date, the process of publishing is ministerial in that nobody can say, well, we're not going to publish. That just follows the second reading inherently. It's just a matter of how soon it can be published. So what I'm saying is, on that Monday, at least I felt like everyone had a clear picture of what the text was going to read. And so then, it was appropriate to resume the process with the Planning Commission happened to have a meeting on that next day, that Tuesday. That was, I believe, the first resumption of their public hearing.
That's correct.
And then the process is now going through its final steps. So I think you're correct in terms of the effective date of that ordinance, but if I hope my point's coming through that ordinance being in effect before the Planning Commission resumed its process on the rezoning applications was not essential to the legality of the rezoning process.
I guess
It was
we-
strictly a notice. It was a matter of, will everyone know what that text looks like?
Can I readdress the commissioners, or do I need to keep addressing
Well,
it specifically to you? As I talked to each of these city attorneys, what baffled me is, when they're very frank about it, is that the city attorney's responsibility is to represent the city's interests. The city commissioners are supposed to represent the citizens' interest. Now, as I see it, and there's like a little bit of a triangle going on there. So, if we're starting to cut out more of the citizen input, that's why I'm thinking about how important this process is. And as it's a statute, it's stating what has to be done before it becomes effective. So technically what you told me was just now, it was effective as December 14th. But what I'm saying is, it's an interpretation. So you guys get to decide the interpretation of the law. Is it effective based on publication? And I have the actual item here, if you'd like to read it for yourself. And I only have one, I apologize, like I said, because I was not going to appear if I didn't actually have something of merit. And so if we choose to change that, which I don't think we can, I mean, honestly, I don't know if we can or not, because it's a state statute, it's not supposed to be effective. If it's not effective, then it's not official, and we shouldn't be taking action on something that's not actually gone through to the final step that it's supposed to go through. That's my interpretation, a public citizen's interpretation. So you're getting a legal representation, and I'm not trying to offend you anyway. I was just talking to all the city attorneys. That's who I contacted, and then I also contacted civil attorneys. Like I said, I was trying to do a lot before I came here today, but your responsibility is to them to present certain information, and that means that, well, as a attorney pointed out, is that if there's something that you guys are wanting to accomplish, your job is to present it in the best fashion of your interpretation of the law. So you have your interpretation of it, and I'm presenting mine. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Hernandez,
Thank you.
let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
If the commission's role is to represent the community and the city attorney's role is to assist the commission, then is it the city attorney's role to assist the commission in representing the community?
It should be, yes, sir.
Should be. You're saying it's not in this case?
I'm saying over the process since I've been involved since May 15th that there have been certain omissions or slight omissions. It's all in the dialogue, how it's spoken, and unfortunately sometimes that isn't appearing in the minutes. It is appearing in the video. So I guess maybe you should be more direct with your questions.
Well,
I know you want
I
me to
think
be
that was direct. Let me ask you another question,
Yes, sir.
if I may. Do you think that those unknown city attorneys, regular attorneys, whomever you have on your list, would be comfortable if their name was disclosed and you disclosed their opinion to you in this format without them being here to be able to explain both the context of the information you provided to them and also to address the context that you're speaking to our commission about their opinion?
Oh no, you can only hear me saying that I can't give any names. Can't get any legal advice. I could get legal advice except I take from Mr. Bingston, but in representation of what the city's interest
Right,
is.
but you're representing them, their opinions, their communication to you as legal advice.
Okay. I mean,
I'm
that's
not
all I have
sure.
to go by.
And
So
I-
if I'm trying to go everywhere to learn this correctly.
And I would
Sorry,
say
sir.
that the take-home message
Yes, sir.
for us, what I'm hearing is there's concern about public comment of the process in the future, okay? And that there was a concern about the legality of what had been done, the action that had been done in the publication. And at that point in time, you've done your job, and you've raised that and said, I think this is a concern.
Okay.
And the city attorney has said no on my interpretation of the law, and the two processes, there has been no jeopardy, which is a grave duty of him to inform us so that we don't jeopardize the citizens of the community by taking an unlawful action. So at this point in time, we've got noted your concern that there could be a foul because of that publication of that, and how things proceeded forward. And we have our city attorney going on record as to how the processes, the two processes, didn't even have to occur that way. So I just wanted to make sure that we covered your concerns here today on record, and that you'll be able to leave being heard and have aired your concerns. No matter how the vote
I can't
results.
direct until the very end, because while I've continued to study, I mean, I have things I'll put in other matters that can't directly relate to this particular item,
Right. Okay.
since these were two quick.
Two things that come to mind for me real quick, and I'm just making, I don't want to misspeak. I think one of your concerns is the process. You feel like that the Planning Commission coming to us, the first thing, maybe I have a question from the city manager, and my understanding is really the Planning Commission, even in their quasi-role, is really just a suggestion for us. I mean, is that generally they sort of are a filter for some of these more non-traditional, like things like this rezoning and process, and then it comes to us, but it's really an advisory capacity, is it not? when it comes up from planning?
It is advisory. They are part of the process, however.
Sure.
And the quasi-judicial nature of the process attaches from the outset, including the Planning Commission's consideration.
Sure, their
of the
roles.
matter.
Ultimately, we need on decisions they make, and certain quasi things, we need a certain count of commission votes and.
Well, the distinction has to do with the nature of the decision. And this example was the classic difference. In the rezoning side, you're looking at a set of facts as they relate to particular locations, and you're applying the zoning code to those facts in determining whether that rezoning should occur or not. You're the jury, you're the judge, you're in that quasi-judicial role. It's not that folks don't have access to the decision makers, it's that it just needs to happen here.
Right.
So that everybody hears the same thing and knows the same thing, and you all are dealing with the same information.
Sure.
On the text change, it is legislative in nature, and much like any legislative matter, as you all well know, I can try to get your attention in the fruit department at a grocery store, if that's the way I can access you, to try to influence your thinking on a legislative matter. And that can happen here, it can happen wherever that happens. Your right to petition your representatives when they're dealing with legislative matters. So that's the distinction that we try to make and try to administer as well as we can.
Sure.
Would it be important to note that there have been omissions at this point if it's tied to this? What I'm saying is that he is, like you were speaking about advisory.
Well, no, I was talking more about the Planning Commission
sorry.
from that regard.
Okay.
The other part of it, what seems to strike me is,
Sure.
is your, and again, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, is that your concern is that by streamlining things like zoning,
Yes, sir.
we are removing the public from it and maybe in some way doing the public harm. But I think maybe the important distinction for me to convey to you is that it is in the community's best interest to have an efficient government who does things correctly. The concept is if we have a store over here, a C4 zoning, it has specific guidelines to go by. So if somebody's within a C4 district, they don't have to take the commission's time or the planning commission's time. It can basically be done administratively through our planning department. The concept of switching the schools over was no malicious intent. It was simply to give them their own specific set of guidelines that if any changes they make fall within that guideline is just a traditional administrative fee instead of, basically my understanding is those things were zoned residential. Every time they needed to do something, it was a conditional use. Is that kind of correct? And it was a
All kinds of
hugely
classifications.
inefficient process to go through. So we're really, there's no negative intent. It's simply to speed up government, and you still have, I suppose, the ability.
I'm thinking to the long term, Mr. Hasseltler.
Yeah, and long-term is where we can't go.
Yeah, well,
On this issue, because unfortunately, long-term takes us a philosophical wherefore route into all the different possibilities that could be there. Unless have a policy at hand and we're getting ready to vote on what a long-term process is going to be implemented as, we really can't go there because it's conjecture, it's guesswork in those avenues. So I would just like to determine if there's any further pertinent
I guess my question,
comment
since we're
on
talking
this.
about omission, is that if, say, city attorney omitted something that should have been presented to you, and he chose not to present that to you, or present it to you a different way, so you could see it a certain way, would that be something I need to let you know about as as I'm discussing this major concept of how I feel what the city commissioners are doing, what the citizens are doing, what the city attorney is doing?
If I may, I would say, please do. If the commission would be inclined, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
I'm anxious.
I mean,
I've got a few other things I'd like to say, but I'm all ears.
yeah.
The omission had to do with conflict of interest and also the changes within the minutes. I know minutes don't have to be paraphrased. I know they don't have to be changed. But when conflict of interest is brought to your attention in a public forum for you guys to have action. You could suggest that it be looked into and then present it back to you with information. Conflict of interest was pointed out that it didn't deal with certain contracts. And the contract wasn't the issue. The actual real point was substantial interest. And by definition, in a state statute, it says it only has to meet one of any of the following. Now, when Mr. Kingston chose to speak about it, as he said he was going to speak to it very carefully, I'd have to actually look at my dates to get that one correct. So you're going to get, Mr. Kingston, you might have that date more than
That's
I do.
okay. You don't have to get the date
No,
specific.
but
I think-
ultimately, there was contracts. He spoke of G contracts. Now, that had nothing to do with substantial interest. Substantial interest was proven by one of any
The
five
substantial,
possibil- four
yeah, the
possibilities.
substantial interest
That was a good term.
warrants
Go ahead.
warrants what actually defines somebody having a substantial interest.
Yes, sir.
And the disclosure is an entirely separate thing. So, is your issue with the definition of what constitutes substantial interest, or the advisement under when one should disclose having a substantial interest? Because those two are together, but they're completely different things. Like if there's an issue coming before the commission, and I have a substantial interest in the outcome because I'm a property owner of that said development, then
Then you
I
just have to disclose it.
then because I'm an owner, that's where I'm at substantial interest. And then the disclosure part is what I'm to do, and those two things are different, and the method at which I disclose
So I
is
guess
what
that would be
I don't
first-
have to recuse.
Okay, go ahead.
I just have to disclose and choose whether or not I'm in a position that I should sit out there or sit up here. And the same follows with any commission or committee.
When you're saying sit out there, you mean
Sit
leave
in the
room?
audience and not vote on the issue and not be a part of the issue. Is that a good characterization of the two?
Yes, I'm not sure I understand the point that we're trying to address, to
The
tell you the
points
truth.
were that were trying to be made in the public forum that was going on in the Planning Commission that hadn't been heard regarding the corrective text amendment, because it wouldn't be a corrective text amendment if there were certain things that were not made available to you, and you made your decision based on what you heard as opposed to what was actually said.
I don't get substantial interest on that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's
That
fair.
just sounds like you're saying that a certain chunk of all the information was not presented to us, whereas the substantial interest is a business owner or somebody that has a seated position that could stand a monetary gain from an action. So,
Yes, sir.
and we've talked about both of those before. So,
Yes,
I
sir,
think
we have.
I think for Mr. Bingston's account
Yeah.
of what.
I guess if there was anything that had to do with Mr. Mike Sell's circumstances and the matter as it was heard by the Planning Commission, and is there something that you're suggesting that I did not, or that somehow the Commission did not know that they should have known? That's what
There
I'm-
was in the actual minutes while you spoke to him being out of the I don't want to get this wrong because on these minutes this information with me at the moment. Ultimately, you disclosed where that he's out of the county and on the Planning Commission, and that was brought up. It wasn't brought up that he actually sold a sign to the area. But then in the minutes, it actually spoke specifically to that there was some information provided that wasn't in the video that appeared in the minutes that said that he disclosed after the hearing. And after the hearing would still be the wrong place to disclose. He would have to disclose before the hearing or during the hearing, or the chairperson of the Planning Commission would have had to actually, ask a question if he didn't think of it. Do you have substantial interest or not? So there is a little disparity there, And that's where you said there was a clash, and so you were recognizing that potentially there was conflict of interest, but what was actually said by you and what appeared in the minutes, which doesn't have to be verbatim, but it wasn't anything near what you said. And that was I guess, I was surprised by that information.
Mr. Hernandez, did you feel that during the meeting in which that was discussed, that the information provided by legal counsel adequately addressed, whether you agreed with the outcome or not, but adequately addressed the pertinent aspects of the substantial interest question?
No, I did not. In terms of substantial interest, because the disclosure stuff that was added on, I felt that substantial interest, he could have just stated that it was a substantial interest. Because it was talking about it at our city level of financial interest and how we could change that to match up.
I'm not asking if you agreed with it,
go
though.
ahead.
I'm just saying, do you believe that the circumstances surrounding the conversation in the Planning Commission and the role of that planning commissioner were adequately addressed in the meeting, not whether you agreed with the
during the meeting, did that actually occur? Did that occur? Do people step down?
No. Okay, there were two questions that were given to you. One had to do with disclosure or potential omission of information by city's legal counsel to this governing body regarding your substantial interest, conflict of interest question with the planning commissioner. And then the other was simply whether the minutes reflected, adequately what that conversation was. Those were the two issues. You've made it very clear you don't believe the minutes addressed what the conversation was, which is fine. Coming back to the other question, which is when staff and Mr. Binkson was discussing that substantial interest question about the planning commissioner in this meeting with these commissioners, do you feel that the aspects of that, not the outcome, but the aspects were addressed in the discourse that went back and forth?
I don't feel that he straight up said that conflict of interest was established by Mike Sell.
That's because I didn't think so.
Right.
Okay.
And I explained why not.
Okay.
He has a substantial interest in a sign company in Belleville, Kansas. That does not mean he inherently has a conflict of interest as he sits as a planning commissioner
But he
dealing
also-
with text amendments to the
But-
Salina Code.
When he was doing the text amendments going all the way back to January, because we all know this has been going back to 2009 that we've been doing this rezoning process, he flat out said that he wanted it moved from conditional to permitted.
Understand. We also clarified the fact in terms of the recommendation of the Planning Commission to this governing body, his vote was academic in terms of the recommendation. In other words, his vote was not necessary. The consequence, even if you subsequently determined that he had a conflict of interest, would be to disqualify his vote. The disqualification of his vote would have had no effect on the recommendation. The recommendation would still have been affirmative.
Because there were 5 people there and we needed a quorum of 5, and if he would step down, I'm going by the administrative bylaws. Our administrative bylaws are actually more strict on conflict of interest than the states are. And so what I've noticed from going back, even though Kennedy, for example, Kennedy would be, he steps down after he's talked. By our rules, that he should have stepped down before or disclosed, and they could have told him he could stay. In fact, they did mention, the chairperson did mention he could stay up there, and he chose to step down, but they're actually supposed to leave the room by our administrative bylaws. They're like supposed to just step out completely, and I guess if this is the room right here, then that makes sense. But I've noticed that there was times throughout the entire process, and I'm talking application that kept changing. That's where I'm a little bit discouraged, and that's where I'm most concerned as a citizen, because we won't have that same place. We won't have that same place once this is done. That's the only. I mean, so I guess if you're saying that he didn't have substantial interest.
I acknowledged that there was a question there, but
Okay.
frankly, in having an opportunity to go back and look at all of the circumstances, but it was academic in terms of the recommendation. Now, your point about Mr. Kennedy I'll acknowledge, when I had the chance to look back and see that he had participated in the discussion and then chose to abstain and not participate in the vote, you're right. He should not have participated at all. And that's just something, in fact, we discussed and anticipate making sure that he and the others are aware of for future reference.
I guess that's basically what I'm here to say, is that what we're doing by changing this and streamlining this so it can be a lot more efficient, if there's all these errors that came out of this one major issue, like you said, it's conjecture. What's going to happen when the only place the citizens can go to look is the legal section of the classified to see a notice of an amendment change? We aren't going to know about the errors that have occurred that are now being addressed, which I appreciate. I mean, I didn't go and, Mr. Gage you can attest to the fact that, you can choose to attest to the fact that while I could have went a totally different direction, I did not do that. I brought errors before because nobody listened at that City Planning Commission, both hearings that attended. When we were coming to the public forum, we were trying to point out that information. And so ultimately, while their decisions are being made, people are being heard, are they still being made with errors? Yes, possibly. No one's perfect. But some of the errors that we are going to make, if we streamline things, could have long-term consequences. So that's where I'm a little bit concerned on the public side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I bring it back to the Commission for action.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 13-10671 on second reading.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve ordinance number 13-10671 on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.3, authorize the purchase of electronic ticketing hardware and software.
Chief Hill.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, good afternoon. The item before you is the staff suggested purchase of DigiTicket, Solus Technologies electronic ticketing mobile software application that automates the writing and processing of citations. I'm going to try to be as brief as I possibly can. I give you a fairly comprehensive blue sheet. I've got 9 pages of continuous process improvement that we went through. This has been thoroughly staffed and examined, and actually we even had a trial, a 60-day trial with this particular software that's been adopted by the Highway Patrol and the Salina County Sheriff's Office. But currently, police officers handwrite citations. At the end of their shift, they return to the station and they physically turn the citations into the watch commander. The watch commander, who's usually charged with being on the street and being in charge of what goes on out there, then must approve, after review, the citations. And then the watch commander hand carries the citations to the Records Bureau, where a clerk manually enters all the pertinent information, and there's a significant amount of information on those citations. Then the citations are sent to municipal court, where they again are manually entered into the records management system of the municipal court. This whole process is time-consuming, prone to errors, misspelled names, addresses, dates of birth, at both the police department level and the court level. And it's a multi-part citation that you have to press through. And quite frankly, we have a number of officers that their handwriting isn't all that legible. What we're proposing is a electronic ticketing software that utilizes a mobile handheld computer, our handheld scanner, connected to our in-car computers to scan violator driver's license, capture vehicle information, and assign violations and court dates to the violator. Basically, they would scan the license, and when they scan the license, It would also query the National Crime Information Center. It would check the license. It would check BOLOs, be on the lookout. It would also check protection orders at that same time. Today, that has to manually be done by the officer in separate steps. The scanning of the license would trigger that scanning. Then it would automatically transfer the tickets to the web application via a cradle if it's a handheld, or wireless if it's our in-car computers. Once it's transferred, that information is immediately transferred to the web application. They would be reviewed, edited, and created PDF versions of the tickets, and reports would be created. And then we would export ticket data and PDFs to the court records management system or the police department records management system. It would significantly reduce the likelihood of error, and it would significantly reduce the time required by a number of different entities in this citation process. The likelihood of errors, we studied those. The watch commander found about 14%, and then it varied from the police department records to the municipal court. But to give you the amount and the opportunity for error, last year officers issued 9,907 court citations, 5,587 warning and defect citations. So it's pretty consistent with what happened in 2011, somewhere in the vicinity of 14,000 to 15,000 written citations a year. This system would basically automate that whole process. There would still be times that we would have to handwrite citations and require manual entry, but it would significantly reduce that opportunity. Also, this system would not only be used for traffic citations, it would be used for warning citations, defect citations, and we are told that we could also use that for notices to appear. One of the benefits that we're going to have, in addition to saving officer time, is increased capacity throughout the system with all the stakeholders. The Salina Police Department looks to save 834 hours. Municipal Court, 280 hours. Now, we had a 60-day trial of this period. We staffed it through continuous process improvement. And we believe that a conservative estimate is this system would save 1,114 hours per annum. Long-term benefits of the system: officers will have more time for patrol activities, increased traffic enforcement, which should result in decreased motor vehicle accidents. Watch commanders will have more time to supervise. Police records personnel will have increased capacity. Municipal court personnel will have increased capacity. Citizens' wait time during traffic stops will be dramatically reduced. The traffic officers that use this system initially, and a new system to them, estimated that it cut their ticket issuing time by 25%. There are some departments reporting that 50%. And I think that the 25% is conservative once the officers would get used to the system. And ticket errors and time to correct them would be dramatically reduced. As I previously mentioned, this is the same electronic ticketing system that's been adopted by the Kansas Highway Patrol, and DigiTicket is offering the City of Salina the state bid price. Also, late last year, the Salina County Commission also approved the acquisition of DigiTicket for the Salina County Sheriff's Department. They have not went forward yet. They're waiting for us because there is some economy and both of us moving forward at the same time. And there's some certain costs that we will share relative to this. I want to make sure that In terms of the cost savings, that you know that this, what we're proposing and asking for your permission, it would not involve tax dollars. We recommend that the commission authorize to be paid for from the police department's federal drug forfeiture fund. Those are seized drug monies. Recommended action. Staff recommends that you authorize the purchase of DigiTicket, electronic ticketing solution hardware and software from Saltus Technologies of Tulsa, Oklahoma, at a cost of $70,053. Also, authorize the required software, a New World interface at a cost of $15,135, the full court interface at $7,667, and installation by KCOM of the system at $2,200, which would be a total projected cost of $95,055. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. I have brought some support with me. Jane Eilers from Municipal Court, who's been part of the process. Lieutenant Wayne Pruitt from the Police Department. He has been the project lead staff member. And Lieutenant Sean Morton, he is our CPI champion, and basically he authored the CPI document with input from all the stakeholders.
Chief, how many units will this set up?
We're looking at 23 mobile units and 3 handheld units.
Okay.
So our cars will be
Yeah.
equipped, and then the motor officers will have handhelds that they can use also.
Great.
Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Is there a software available, or does the program allow interface or communication with the little handhelds our parking enforcement folks have? So if there's a BOLO for a certain license plate, that'll pop up when they...
They can already get that information, but it's actually two separate systems from 2 separate companies.
So do we have it or do we not have it?
Pardon me?
Do we have that in effect or not? Or is that something-
For handheld? Mm-hmm. For parking?
For our parking
Yes, we
enforcement?
do.
Oh, good.
Yes.
And hopefully you get at least a year's worth of tech support coming with this.
Pardon me?
Are you getting some tech support coming?
Yes,
to help
yes.
you get-
Actually, what
Okay.
our plan is to based upon your approval, is to get Saltus in here and train our traffic officers. Those are officers that write a lot of citations, so they become very adept at that very quickly. And so then it would be train the trainer. And so once we know that all the bugs are worked out of the system, and certainly there will be some, then we would have our traffic officers train the entire department, and then we would roll the whole system out to the whole department. Saltus has a very good track history. We've done a lot of background check on Saltus, and we have in the agreement that Mr. Bankston hasn't seen yet, and that's why I haven't brought it before you today either, but they have significant technical support spelled out.
And they'll be coming over to help Jane and Judge Stoss
Yes,
get it all
yes.
implemented.
Yeah, because we're going to have the full court interface also, and so we're going to have, and Jack Rolfs with his people, between Saltus
He knows
and
everything.
Jack, they can't figure it out. Nobody can figure it out.
I think Commissioner Angel brings up a good point. Is the parking tickets and this are on 2 different systems, you're saying, can they both be switched over eventually to the Saltus system, or do they always need to remain separate? My thoughts are, again, it's just efficiency, if we can get one type.
I'm not sure if parking can come onto the system at all, and I don't know. Do you know, Wayne?
I'd have to do some more checking with Saltus and see if they even have a parking software.
It just seemed like a good thought. I mean, when she mentioned, I just thought if we had one system that used, it might be easy. Currently, do the parking tickets automatically go over to the courthouse, or do they still have a process that they have to go through? Or I don't know how the parking tickets work.
Looks like they're automatically going over to the...
They're automatic. Okay, so it's already automatic. It's
Yeah.
in place. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's working very well because we've had a number of vehicles that we have either towed or the owners come out and we've stood by as they went down back gone to municipal court and paid their outstanding fines.
You should know
So-
about that, Commissioner.
Luckily, I don't, they must know my car down there. I haven't got one yet.
That's probably because we don't know your car.
Yeah, maybe that's it, yeah.
And I'm sure this research is done, but we feel comfortable because of the tenure of all the different interface and software companies that this is a system that'll be around for a long time and upgradable at a reasonable cost each year.
Soltis is a relatively new company. I mean, they don't have 25 years experience. But I think the patrol, in addition to what we've done due diligence in looking at this company and checking references, and I think this will be basically an electronic ticketing application package that's probably going to be widely adopted throughout the state of Kansas.
Okay.
Just to add to that, Commissioners, the thought that the Highway Patrol, purchase this as well is very helpful because obviously their future is based on the customer base, and if you can get, highway patrols and other large customers, and that's going to help our odds as well in the future. But as you know, with any software company, it's always a little hard to tell, so you do the best you can.
Any further questions of staff? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have any public comment on this item? Bring it back to the commission for further discussion and action.
Mayor,
I
I
move
mo-
we authorize the purchase of electronic ticketing hardware and software.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve the purchase of the presented electronic ticketing hardware and software. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.4, request to consider rescinding an order to repair or remove a dangerous structure located at 633 South 4th Street.
Mr. Schregg?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Your action to award a contract to TNR Dirt Construction for demolition of 6 dangerous structures on December 17th of last month represented the culmination of our 2012 dangerous structure abatement process. That contract award was in the amount of $58,420.07, and the only conditions that were placed upon it were TNR Dirt Construction providing the required documentation, which they have done. So they've met the conditions of your contract award. The day after you took that action, city staff was contacted by an owner of one of the properties and then subsequently contacted by their legal counsel requesting that the city not proceed with demolition of a vacant property owned by them. And so staff and legal counsel reviewed the request and the procedure that should be followed in such a circumstance and really didn't find much in the way of guidance statutorily or by city code. As my report indicates, statutes very clearly prescribe the process to be followed regarding public notice and conducting a public hearing leading up to a determination regarding demolition, which you made in the fall. And in this particular case, those statutory requirements were met and exceeded. So, as I said, the statutes don't contemplate or provide any additional requirements or processes, and staff felt that in light of this request, there was really 2 decision points to be considered by you as the City Commission. The first was the broader policy decision of whether we wish to receive and consider appeals after the due process is run, the public notice has been completed, and the hearing process has been completed. So we view that as kind of decision point number 1. And then secondly, assuming that you have an interest in doing so, then the second question would be more specific to the merits of the request at this particular case as it relates to that particular home. So it's a little unconventional, but my staff report is broken into those 2 decision points. And my intention would be to stop at the end of the discussion of decision point number 1, let you discuss that, ask any questions of staff, and then if needed, proceed to decision point number 2. So we've characterized decision point number 1 as consideration of an untimely dangerous structure appeal. And I provided to you excerpts from the Kansas statutes that prescribe the process that's to be followed for a dangerous structure. I won't read to you those 9 steps. I'd be happy to elaborate on those if necessary. But in summary, the statute provides 2 certified mailings, 3 newspaper publications, and a public hearing before you as the City Commission, at which time the owner's allowed to show cause why a structure should not be condemned or ordered repaired. So that is the required due process. Additional measures that we take as part of our process is that we provide a certified mailing of the building official's initial notice in order to abate, and that actually precedes initiation of a process with the City Commission. We physically attach to the structure the building official's notice in order to abate. We physically attach to the structure a placard advising that the building has been declared a dangerous structure and that the city will be contracting for its demolition. And then we provide certified mailings advising that the City Commission had declared the building a dangerous structure, another mailing that the repair deadline had passed, and that the city would be contracting for demolition of the structure, and the personal belongings not removed by November 11th, in this case, will be deemed abandoned property included as part of the demolition. So that's an effort to provide you both the statutory requirements as well as the additional steps that we followed. With respect to commission action or recommendation on decision point number 1, I guess it might be helpful to jump to the, let me see here, page 6, if I may, the conformance with the strategic plan. And I did not indicate whether this action was in conformance with the strategic plan, depending on what your opinion of the outcome is, but I did note that it relates to items included in the shared vision statement related to the city being exciting to live in, thriving both economically and socially, the city being clean, attractive, and inviting, Salina being a place with a quality of life that not only appeals to residents but to visitors, Salina being attractive and well-maintained, and it being evident that good housekeeping and high community standards are valued, the City Commission being committed to providing high-quality city services within available resources, the City Commission recognizing the role and responsibility to provide the needed policy direction and resources to administration, and the city's administrative personnel being committed to daily transforming this direction and resources into the highest possible quality of municipal services consistent with the expectations of the City Commission. Salina being a town that's respectful of its heritage and adaptive reuse of historic and architecturally significant buildings, and Salina encouraging and being supportive of industrial development, economic expansion, market-driven tax-based growth, and homegrown entrepreneurialism. I also noted that goals 3 and 4 seem to be applicable, goal 3 being providing the highest quality of services, and goal 4 being maintaining growth and development policies that are updated to reflect current conditions and desired growth direction. Having said that, I'd now like to jump back to page 3, where the discussion point is the commission action or recommended action on decision point number 1. As previously noted, the statutory requirements are specific, and there is a required process to ensure due process for the property owner. Your consideration of an appeal after the conduct of a public hearing would seem to indicate that our current process is insufficient and needs improvement. I don't wish to speak for you, but staff tried to anticipate that if that were the case, what improvements might be possible. One could be personal service, but in our estimation it's not practical due to out-of-town ownerships, as well as individuals that actively avoid being served. And if we end up with service in town and not personal service out of town, we've got disparate treatment. And then that approach increases the responsibility upon the city while decreasing the responsibility on the property owner. We also thought about signage, trying to make it more noticeable, I guess, from the curb that the structure in question is under a notice, and we believe that the notices that are currently posted are sufficiently noticeable to a responsible property owner that's monitoring their property. And then there's also the issue of just setting a precedent. It would seem that taking up this appeal would set a precedent that the process that's been followed to date, certified mailings, notice publications, show cause hearings, and orders to abate related deadlines are not binding, and that appeals will be heard well after the communicated deadlines. So lastly, we also noted that in terms of an alternate approach, while it's out of our control, the most likely alternate approach is to seek injunctive relief in court. And staff recognizes that represents a legal expense on the part of the property owner as well as the city, but at this step in the process, that is one more formal alternative to basically reverse the City Commission's prior actions. Staff identified 3 options for your consideration. One is to determine, as it relates to the policy decision in general, one is to determine that the City of Salina's dangerous structure notification hearing and abatement order process is appropriate, and decline to consider additional appeals after expiration of the hearing date and abatement deadline, recognizing that the property owner has the right to seek relief from the City's order in court. The second option that we identified is to determine that consideration of dangerous structure appeals after expiration of that hearing date and abatement deadline is not precedential in nature and does not necessitate a separate policy decision, and proceed with consideration. And then thirdly, you could determine that the City Commission should consider dangerous structure appeals after the expiration of the public hearing date and abatement deadline. Staff believes that sufficient notice and due process has been provided by the current dangerous structure procedure, and we recommend option number 1. My intention will be to stop here, answer any questions that you might have as it relates to the broader policy question, and I believe we may have public in attendance as well.
I guess on discussion point number 1, we can go ahead and discuss that through. I know that we've taken 2, possibly 3 different sets of dangerous structure abatements in my time on commission, and I do know that there have been structures that started that process that were pulled from the demolition order and request. One that comes to mind was one that had a fire on the house, and it was thought that it was just going to be demolished and the owner wasn't responding, and then the owner decided to rebuild it, and the owner was able to subsequently have it pulled, file for the permits needed, and rebuild the structure. So are there instances where our process as it occurs today works for those that get their notification and then determine that they're going to do something with their structure?
Yes, there certainly are. In fact, this year, the number of structures that were initially brought to you for declaration of a dangerous structure resulted in a number of them being resolved such that they didn't come back to you as a dangerous structure in need of abatement. Mr. Hobby can speak to the number more specifically than I can.
At the beginning of this demolition process, we had 10 properties that we brought to our attention and staff's attention, and of those 4 were completed with a process or a compliance agreement of some sort with the city staff to go ahead and have those properties cleaned up, abated, and put back into structural use.
Okay.
We just need the property owner to respond in a timely manner as to what they're going to do and show some effort to rehab the property.
Correct. In fact, the determination that you made, I believe the previous determination that you made was that they were dangerous structures after 1 round of notification, and that then declared them and set a deadline for action, and that created a whole nother certified mail notice process as well as placarding, and that deadline lapsed, and that then is when it came back to you to award a demolition contract.
Yeah, and generally, I think Mike has it probably listed under the next aspect of it on the specific issue, but any time that you've awarded a contract and then the contract provisions are fulfilled by the contractor, it creates issues if once we decide to modify it, once we've started. So I think that's probably where you have more specifics in the next item. I don't want to get into those, but generally speaking, any time you would choose to do that after you've got to that last step, it's going to impact your process, and it could impact the that amount in the relationship with that contractor.
Well, as for myself, I'm not interested in opening that door to start considering untimely appeals. There was more than adequate notice and opportunity to come in and work on this property prior to being at this point, and I think we need to move forward.
Any other discussion or questions towards staff on discussion item 1? I think I would like to hold public comment until we get to the end of discussion, and then anybody from the public that wishes to speak can just go ahead and summarize on all discussion points, because we're not going to have separate points of action. That's correct. There's just a sole course of action. Is there a sole course of action? Or do
I think our intention was getting direction from you initially whether you wish to hear untimely requests at all. If the answer is no, then there's no need to proceed. If you're open to that, then we would proceed to the specifics of this case.
Okay, got you. Understand. Sorry for the misunderstanding. So are there further questions of staff or further comments at this time?
Well, I was going to say I think I agree with Commissioner Angel.
Okay. Do we have anybody from the public that would wish to comment on this item? Sir, if you'd come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Brian Metzger. My personal residence is 116 31st Road, Brookville. I'm the owner of this property. I'll try to be as brief but informative as possible. I'll also try to be as candid and transparent as I can about how this situation came about. I purchased this property, well, by profession I'm a landlord. I have 37 units within Salina. As a landlord, the only certified mail I've ever received from the city was from Neighborhood Services, which happens frequently. Owning that many rental units, anytime somebody's grass is too tall or their trash is out on the wrong day or they put their old recliner on the porch, I get a notice. I had a tenant that had some tires for sale. He put the tires on the curb with a for sale sign. I got a notice. I spent several years trying to chase down these notices by going to the post office and being told that the letter was out with the carrier. I had to come back at another time. I'd try to catch the carrier, and back and forth and back and forth. Finally, I called Neighborhood Services and told them the trouble I was having with getting these notices. And 99% of the time, by the time I got the notice in my hand, it had already been resolved because the same copy of the notice goes to the tenant. Had an open discussion with them about how we could avoid all this chasing of letters and everything. I gave them my cell phone number. I told them anytime there's a problem that's not immediately resolved, please call me, which they have done for quite some time now. I'm not one of those people that tries to avoid receiving notices, but you know, and I've been very cooperative with Neighborhood Services. I purchased this property with the intent of remodeling it. At the time that I purchased it, had about $20,000 available that I was going to spend on the rehab of this property, which is what I do, which is what I've been doing for a number of years, and I've got, I believe, a pretty solid reputation in Salina for buying ugly old houses that nobody wants them and turning them into properties that people are proud to live in. Shortly after the purchase of this property, and this is where I become painfully transparent, I found out that my wife had over $25,000 in credit card debt that I was not aware of, and that I was not even legally tied to. Felt obligated at that time to, and she was going into default on it. I used the money I had available for the rehab of this property to pay off those credit cards, after which she filed for divorce and kept me tied up in a property settlement for approximately 2 years. All major capital improvement projects at that time had to come to a halt because of the battle during the property settlement. I got that resolved in time, you know, looking to hit the ground running just in time for the housing market to collapse, the banks to pucker up, and the economy to take a nosedive. My vacancy rate at that time went from about 5% to about 30%. That, on top of the 2-year property settlement, led to the filing of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, more commonly known as a business reorganization plan. Again, during that process, there were no major capital improvements done. All my properties were maintained to the best of my ability through that, though, and I believe that my properties, by and large, are maintained, my rental properties, above and beyond what is typical for rental properties in Salina. Having had that Chapter 11 behind me, I began work on this property, not having the $20,000 in the bag to do it all at once, but went over there to start working on the property and found this notice attached to the back of the property. Immediately upon finding this notice, I contacted the city and began the process of finding out what in the heck had gone on. I learned that they had sent certified letters, which I assumed was from Neighborhood Services because on the card it just says City of Salina. And I and I knew that I was in good standing with them and that they'd contact me if something wasn't immediately resolved. They also showed me pictures of placards that were attached to the front of the structure. Since all this started and I wasn't able to do the total rehab on the property that I wanted to do, I've used it for storage. Storing appliances used in my rental properties, building materials, things of that nature. Occasionally stuff that tenants leave behind that I'm required to store before disposing. After I bought the property, well, I've had a bit of a beef with one of the neighbors to this property, because shortly after purchasing it, I let them know of my intent to remodel it, which excited them because I think this has probably been an ugly house for the last 30 or 40 years. Then when all these unfortunate circumstances came about, I wasn't able to do it in a timely manner. This neighbor got pretty upset and became a real thorn in my side. I have no proof, and I'm not going to mention names because that would open me to libel, but I believe this person has been removing the placards from the front of the house as soon as they were put on. Had I seen them, I would have immediately taken action. I understand that a notice was published in the Salina Journal. I don't subscribe to the Salina Journal, haven't since about 2003. Had anybody that knows me read this and realized it was my property and let me know, I would have immediately taken action. As soon as I found out what was going on, though, I jumped on it and made it my biggest priority. The report from the city that shows pictures of the property and deficiencies to the property. Do you have copies of that, I believe? Okay.
We can project those on the screen if that's helpful.
Either way, if you have copies, that's fine too. On page 2, it shows picture number 1. One of the issues is that the porch has sunk about 2 inches on the front, and the roof is beginning to separate from the house. It's an ugly roof, and my first priority is to get rid of that roof. It'll take all of about 10 to 15 minutes to remove that from the house. The porch sinking on the front, unfortunately, near the railroad tracks. This is a very common problem with houses, with trains going down there and the ground vibrating. Over the course of decades, those concrete slabs can sink a little bit. That's a simple process of digging under the front edge of that concrete slab, jacking it up, putting sand under it to level it and secure it. Their biggest concern seems to be with the foundation. And they have a number of pictures showing siding not lining up with the concrete and cracks in the concrete. That concrete in those pictures is not the foundation. I'm sure we've all seen houses where at some point somebody poured concrete around the outside of the foundation to help shed water, and that is what these pictures are of. The house has not shifted off of the foundation, and I have pictures from inside the basement showing that at some point newer block foundation was built and that there's brick foundation that's still in good condition. I've got copies of those pictures and a brief proposal that I'd like to give to each of you. More copies if anybody else wants some. I certainly wish I'd brought some bottled water at this point. Now, I apologize for the lousy quality of the pictures. They were taken with a cell phone and printed on a printer that has served me well for a very long time, but does not print pictures very well at all. The first picture, you should be able to make out that it's concrete block. mortar intact, blocks are all plumb, straight line. Second picture is an older section of foundation that's brick. Shows that the bricks are solid, secure, mortar intact, good condition. The third picture is from the west side of the house, where they've said that there is no foundation. I opened up a section that was covered up to show that that concrete on the outside is not actually part of the foundation.
If you care to take a break, yeah. There you go, sir.
Wonderful. There is a concrete foundation that I did not dig to the bottom of, but I dug down right against the edge for a good 2 to 3 feet. I believe that this concrete foundation goes below the frost line. On top of that is the block that you see there. And then the rest of the concrete is poured outside the foundation for whatever reason. The foundation on this property is solid. The recommendation to demolish the property because the foundation is bad is based on faulty information. My proposal: remove that porch roof, level the porch slab, reinforce or replace any sections of wall stud or sill plate that are found to be damaged by rot or termites. There's a picture of one side of the house where there's some pieces of siding removed, and you can see that there's been some rot at the ends of the studs there. I pulled that siding off because I could tell there was some damage because water had been coming off the roof and splashing right there for who knows how many decades. The wall isn't rotted out, but the ends of the studs are, and that would actually be pretty easy to repair. Replace any damaged or missing window glass. There is a pane of glass missing. Somebody broke in, rummaged through some of the junk that was there, and stole nothing of value. That window's boarded up and has been for a while. We don't demolish buildings because they have had a window boarded up. Since I was using the property for storage with the intent of remodeling it when I was able to, there was no great rush to get new glass in there. Level the kitchen floor. That's not one of their issues. That's one of mine. It's as simple as, jacking it up a little bit and bracing it. Kitchen floor is uneven. That's a simple process. Not involving tearing out the old floor, not involving tearing out the joists or anything like that. Add exterior and attic insulation. I always insulate my properties as best I possibly can. That's not one of their issues, that's one of mine. Install new exterior siding. There's some wood that's in bad condition that will be replaced. And then my intent is to wrap the entire exterior of the house with OSB and foam board insulation before putting siding on. Complete the installation of the furnace. One of the first things I did was to start putting a brand new furnace in this house, which that process stopped when the things that happened that I described to you. The furnace is in the basement. It's set in place. It's not connected to the gas or electrical. Being as it's winter, I need some heat in there if I'm going to work on it. That would be my first task. And I have been currently using Mitch Loader with AirTech for my heating and air needs, and he would be getting the permit and connecting that furnace. It's a new 94% efficiency furnace. Demolish the shed at the southeast corner of the property. There's an old shed back there. I think it's only standing because it's leaning against some trees. That would immediately go. This isn't one of their issues, but it's one of mine. Remove all immature trees and treat them chemically to prevent regrowth. There's a lot of scrubby little trees that pop up. I cut them down, they pop up. I cut them down, they pop up. So those would be treated with brush killer to prevent any regrowth and then trimmed out completely. And then an extensive interior remodel, because I'm not a slumlord and I don't rent ugly houses. This house would go from being the ugliest house on the block to one of the best looking houses on the block, inside and out. It was never my intent to dodge notices, and I greatly regret that that it's come to this. I wish that I had continued chasing down those certified letters for the last 12 years, and then this wouldn't have happened. But I'm asking that you give me the opportunity, please, to rehab this property. It's ugly, but it is not a dangerous structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Metzger?
Well, I had a question that I noticed that the notices went to 117 East Beloit. Is that
That's
where you, and did you
I-
not file a forwarding address when you?
I have an office at that address. That is a triplex on East Beloit, and I have an office space there. My residence is rural. I don't want my important mail sitting in a mailbox that's half a mile from my house out on the road. So all my mail, all my notices and everything go to the office address.
So what you're saying is you didn't open these, or ignored these?
I never got them in my hand.
With the exception of one. You signed for one.
Okay, and which one was that? Was that,
It would have been May 25th of 2011 for 605 North 10th Street. It would have been grass, weeds, a chest freezer, furniture, tires, limbs, and miscellaneous trash and debris on the property.
Okay.
And an inoperable vehicle.
okay, so that was tenants that moved out and left a mess, and that's a completely separate property, separate issue. And that was one that I happened to be at my office working when the mailman showed up with it in his hand. Otherwise, I get a little orange card dropped in the mail that says that I have a letter from City of Salina.
Yeah, when you go down to, when you get those orange forms, I get certified letters all the time. They don't try and redeliver it, so it's never with the mailman. Once they notice you, it's sitting there waiting at the post office. When I go down there and I sign, they never tell me it's out with the mailman. It's always sitting there waiting. So if you go and you sign for it, it's there.
I've been told that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten certified mail from other sources where I was able to sign the card, put it out in the mailbox, and they'd leave the certified letter.
Next, yeah.
And I've been told that's not an option with notices that I get from the city, that I have to physically be present to receive it.
I think
I've
that's
tried
the
signing
case
the
on
card
all of
and
them,
putting it
yeah.
out, and they tell me that I can't do that.
Yeah, I don't think
I've
that's
gone
just.
to the post
I think-
office
yeah.
and I've been told that they're attempting redelivery. on
I think
certified
that's commonplace with a lot of things. I think everything that I order nowadays, it's over $150, even if it's not. It has to be signed by myself. And as painful as this might sound, if it's important to me, I'm going to go down to the post office and I'm going to get it. If I know that I've got $150 worth of parts or something, then I'm going to go and get them if it's important to me. That's kind of the discouraging thing. I understand how all of the notices and tenants that don't respect your property let weeds and things get away, and I understand the process of cell phone notification, but I would still have retrieved each one of those, and I also understand all of the personal life issues. Unfortunately, those are real and present in all of our lives. The one thing that I wanted to make clear of is what was the date that the property would have been placarded?
Initially, it was placarded April 3rd, and then that was notice of the violation, and then it was placarded again in October 17th.
Okay. And the one that you found was on the rear of the property.
Yes.
Did you have no physical walk around on your property? The placard that he would have found, what was that, the second one that would have been
Yes.
posted? And what
Yes.
date was that again?
October 17th.
Okay. So there was quite a lapse in between the time that that house was placarded and you discovered the one on the back.
Correct.
Had you been to your property in that amount of time? Not that you're legally obligated to,
Right.
but
Numerous times, but I entered through the front door, got the materials that I needed, and left. Did not walk around to the back of the house to look at it when I would go over there to pick up a refrigerator or something.
I guess my question would be, in April, what's happening? It's raining. May, June, July, grass was growing. Nobody mowed the backyard the entire time?
Yes, the backyard was mowed. The house
nobody-
has been mowed.
Nobody looked at the sign and said, hey, there's a big green notice on the,
That was in October, I think he said.
where were the other notices?
Well,
There
the
wa-
one in October, from the photos, it was put on the front door and the back door.
Wasn't there a back one during those April, May, June months too?
And I have a picture of the one that they put on the front of the house, which I guess was in April. It's under the covered porch. It's in plastic. It's stapled to the house. Somebody went over there after this was put on and physically removed it from the house.
The other thought is, don't we have, we're not allowed to store things in our rental properties, are we, that are used for other rental houses? I thought we had a code against that.
That would be correct. It's a zoning issue that we have not brought forth at this particular time, because we're working on the dangerous structure portion.
Yeah.
And I think that's two parts. One is the permitted use. One is somewhat, as Mr. Metzger said, if you're using it for storage and aren't motivated to maintain the exterior and the windows, it's a blight on the neighborhood.
Right. And then you mentioned it's a high-efficiency heat and air, and in picture 5, I see the vent work for a high-efficiency air conditioner there, if I'm not mistaken. So which means work was taking place over there without permits, more than just setting a heat and air unit on the floor over there. I mean, what I'm getting to is, and I'm not trying to be mean, but in the way I am, is that you just have complete disregard for the city. I mean, our codes, your neighbors. You know, I mean, we're trying to fix our community up, and you're trying to skirt around our codes here, and that's the whole reason we're here. And now you come before us saying, you know, I should have got to it. And I agree with the mayor. Those personal issues, it's a drag, you know, and I'm sorry that it happened, but, you know, you have an obligation to this city. You may live in Brookville, but you have an obligation to the city of Salina when you come in and buy investment properties. Hey, it'd be great. I have rental properties. The mayor has rental properties. It'd be fantastic if we could just show up once a month and collect checks and not have to fix our properties up. I get the letters, too. I got some dumpy houses on Baker Street I've tried to fix up. I get the renters that go in there and they leave the stuff. The city sends me letters just like, actually, they send my brother a letter, thank God. But they send my brother. We have to go over there, too. It's embarrassing. I mean, it's embarrassing. I'm just, you know, I'm like you. I put my money in those houses. When we fixed them up, they were probably in the top 90% of those blocks. And 2 years later, they're back down in the lower 50. People don't take care of them. But you know what? Instead of just not answering those city mail that comes to us, we go over there and fix up what we can. And then we plan, look, we're going to have to redo this house again here in a couple of years. It's looking bad because, I mean, for me to stand in this position and judge you, I kind of have to take care of my stuff too. And we get the problems just like you do, but I just see a continuous pattern of disregarding all the efforts that we've made to reach you. And I definitely appreciate if you say, I mean, I don't know your properties, but if you say that you go in and fix them up and make them nice in the neighborhood and give people a place to live, I appreciate that. But, you know, this is just so far gone here. And to believe that you didn't have an opportunity to hear about this for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, it's just kind of unfathomable that you'd let it go that long. And I feel like you kind of let us down as a citizen, really. I mean, and have sort of, you know, put this in front of us, and now we have to pass judgment to knock this house down after we feel like we've given you adequate time. And you understand the dilemma we have. If we stop and say, okay, we think Brian's a good guy, he's going to fix the house up, he's going to do everything he wants, then what's the point of this whole process that we go through and this adequate notification, and when does it stop? And I think that was Commissioner Angel's point, is at what point do we have to just lay down the rules and say, we've given you opportunity, it's blight, it's got to go, you know?
Well, and it's unfortunate, we're going on 9 months, and I realize what you went through is complete drag, but if you would have, at any time in the last 9 months, picked up that mail and talked to Mike or Gary or Elvin, you probably, I'm sure you would have had some consideration and been given time to fix this up and get your plan before the Planning Commission, have it taken care of. But at this point, to come in when you haven't gone and basically taken any personal responsibility to go pick up those certified letters and make sure your business was in good standing and make sure the property was in good standing, it's tough for us to now go back and look at what should have been looked at by staff and what would have been considered by staff. I can't tell if it's foundation. If it wasn't foundation, you could have sat down with any one of these gentlemen and showed them what the real problem was, but I have to go on what our staff tells us, and if they say it's foundation, then it's foundation. But we shouldn't even be considering that, in my view, at this point, because all of those substantive matters are so far past the time for consideration that I don't, like I say, I don't want to open up untimely appeals at this point.
Well, I haven't tried to skirt anything, and I do not have disregard for the city, the process, the permits. I hired a guy to put in the furnace, assumed that he was going to pull the permit. He had a valid business at that time. Paid him for materials up front, was going to pay for labor upon completion. Paid for the materials. He set the furnace in place. All this hit the fan, and I told him we need to stop for now. That business is no longer in operation. I don't think the guy even lives in Salina anymore. I have no idea where he is. If he didn't apply for a permit or hadn't gotten the permit done at this, at that point, this is the first I'm hearing about it. I haven't tried to skirt anything. I didn't pull placards off the front of the house and throw them away. Somebody has done that on my behalf before I got the chance to see them. I know that there isn't any precedent for this because I'm betting this set of circumstances hasn't happened before. Not like this. And I'm not trying to change policies or anything. I'm just asking for a chance to go in and make this right and do what needs to be done. The city is going to be better off with another unit of decent housing that's on the tax rolls than with an empty, worthless lot. I think it would benefit the city. It's going to benefit me. It'll benefit future tenants and everybody. If you can please, please just show me a little leeway, some variance on this so I can get this done. With the certified letters, I honestly believed I was going above and beyond to try to have open communication with the city to get things resolved. Anytime a tenant lets me know there's a problem, I'm on it immediately. Anytime I found out from neighborhood services that something wasn't being done by the deadline in the letter, I was on it immediately. They haven't had to fight with me on any of these things. I'm not trying to skirt, and there is no blatant disregard on my part. I try to operate my business so that my reputation is my biggest advertiser.
With respect to the foundation, I feel it important to note that staff noted back in March that we could not get access to the interior, so our opinion was based on an exterior inspection only.
But again, that should have been brought up 6 months ago and addressed with staff, not
I'm not disagreeing. I just, in terms of a staff opinion of the foundation, it's limited to what we can see from the exterior.
And And had I known 6 months ago, I'd have been all over it.
Mayor, excuse me, I would appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all privately, if I may.
Legal?
Yes, I'm sorry, legal.
Anybody need the wording?
Yeah. Any further comments, Mr. Metzger?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whatever motion's made for executive session, if you would allow for a 3-minute break prior to
Yeah, it might be
the
good.
executive session, it'd be appreciated. So.
Do you want that, which,
The attorney-client.
attorney-client? Okay, I moved to,
How-
how long do you
about how
need?
long?
I would think 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. I move to recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest of the matters, and reconvene at, let's say, what's 6:07? That work for you? 6:07?
Second.
Motion and a second to move into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We are currently in executive session with a short break beforehand.
I think there is recognition that the Malian army itself was incapable of resolving.
Do I need to make a motion?
We are now back in our general session.
Mayor, I move that we reconvene back in executive session for another 10 minutes and return at 6:20.
Second.
Motion and a second to reconvene into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We're back in executive session.
Gun owners are not uniformly against any kind of gun control. I think there's a misperception.
We've returned from executive session and are now back in our general session. Is there further discussion on this item? Mr. Metzger, if the city doesn't proceed, you go ahead and come forward, please. Question for you that I didn't fully ask earlier. If the city doesn't proceed with the demolition of this home as scheduled, you've presented an action plan that I'm sure could be broadened if it was required by the city building service department. Do you have any extenuating circumstances at this point in time that would delay anything other than, I think you used the phrase early, I'd get on it right away, type of a time frame?
Only unpredictable winter weather and things that I need to do to the exterior of the property. Kind of hard to be putting siding on when it's 10 degrees and blowing snow.
But as far as nailing down a permit and getting initial inspections done and all of that, there's no travel or life circumstantial reasons that would keep you from being able to do that right away?
None that I'm aware of right now.
Okay. Thank you. That was...
Don't get married between now and then. So.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any other questions of staff or further discussion? Any motions at this time?
I'll give it a shot, but please feel free to amend this if you disagree. I would move that the commission consider Mr. Metzger's request subject to the following conditions. A, that Mr. Metzger provide a non-refundable deposit in the amount of $3,350 to be applied to demolition costs or stranded costs incurred by T&R Dirt, depending upon the final outcome of the City Commission's deliberations. 2, on or before January 28th, 2013, Mr. Metzger shall apply for all necessary building permits in order to bring the property into full code compliance. 3, that city staff will review Mr. Metzger's applications for code compliance. 4, that staff will prepare a compliance agreement for the City Commission's consideration that includes, but is not limited to, providing a specified time frame for compliance by Mr. Metzger, which shall not exceed 90 days, requiring the submission of an acceptable financial security to be utilized by the city for demolition in the event the timeline is not met or in the event the City Commission deems the property an unsafe structure, and including formal consent from Mr. Metzger to said demolition if the specified deadline is not met. And for Mr. Metzger to grant interior access on or before January 25th, 2013 to a city building official for an initial assessment of the structure's soundness, knowing that we may also have to have additional access to the interior with a structural professional for inspection and a final determination on the soundness of the structure.
Second.
Any further discussion at this point in time?
He's thinking.
Question, if I may, Mayor and Commissioners. I think the motion was well articulated. I just wanted to be sure. Depending on the determination of the, or based on the interior inspection, how does that relate to the ability to go forward or not with any work necessary as it in?
I guess I would just question E for you and say, would it just be for City Building Services to perform the initial internal inspection of the property before the issuance of the building permit?
Correct.
To have
Yeah,
full
I would
knowledge of everything that needs to
specify
incur for
that-
code work.
That if after the inspection, the questions regarding the foundation are answered either by our city staff or by a structural engineer, by whatever structural professional inspects it, if it's still there's still a foundation problem, if it's still a dangerous structure, I think it's back to where we are today and moving on with the process as opposed to moving forward with rehabbing the property.
So in that case, I want to make sure that we're all clear. So Mr. Metzger has to provide full access to the property for us if requested to inspect. I'm not clear if you want him to initiate using a structural engineer on his own. Is that just an option on his part, or is it something that you require?
That's what I understood. Is that would be my understanding, is that if he wanted to bring that to us, I mean, I don't know what the commissioner had in mind, but
My thought was if Mr. Metzger would be fine, but my thought was if staff decided that they couldn't make that determination on the foundation and wanted to also get the advice of a structural professional, that would be available to city staff as well.
So if the building official could not make that determination, that we could require Mr. Metzger to provide a structural, proper professional, I should say, I don't know if it's structural engineer, I presume it might be, but require that he procure the proper professional to help make that determination.
All right.
Okay.
yeah, that would be my understanding.
And so if in the final result of the inspection we determine that it's determined that the foundation is sufficient and does not contribute to a dangerous structure, then he would have the time frame that you outlined, 90
Correct.
days, to make all the other improvements. If it's determined that the foundation is substandard to the point that it does contribute to a dangerous structure, would he have that same 90 days to tear down the property on his own versus the city actually coming in and tearing it down? So does he get the option in that time frame, I guess, depending on the outcome of that is my question.
I would say no, since we're requiring him to put a bond or some other financial security up to ensure that it's there for the city to move forward with demolition.
Okay, so if it's found that it needs to be demolished based on the outcome of the foundation inspection, then it would come back into the city's process for demolition.
We'd be back where we were 30 minutes ago.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'd still second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second dealing with the request by Mr. Metzger on the 633 South 4th Street property in which a non-refundable deposit will be issued. Mr. Metzger will start the permit process January 28th or prior. The city will have access for internal inspection by January 25th, and if the result of that inspection proves a structural deficiency to the nature at which demolition is required, then it shall be continued with the demolition process by the city. And there is as well a compliance agreement that outlines specific time frame, not to exceed 90 days, and a submittal of an acceptable financial security. All those in favor of that motion?
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.5, authorize an amendment to the design contract for Fire Station Number 1, Project Phase 1 with CMA Architects.
Good evening. I was going to say good afternoon, but we've turned it to evening. This agenda item before you is a little bit self-serving on my part. I want to share with you what this has to do with. It has to do with the remodel of Fire Station 1. It's kind of ironic that you had to deal with a demolition issue a second ago. We're dealing with a rebuilding issue right now. But Fire Station 1, as it started into the process of being reconstructed and remodeled, very early on we looked at that, at the operation of the department or the building, and you know, we thought that we could operate within the structure with the equipment and maintain the operation, that the fire administration would be able to operate within that building. And as we got deeper into the project, we found that in dealing with the contractor, what he was going to need to have done, there was no way we could work there at the same time that building was going to be remodeled. And today, you can see it even down the street. There's a crane sitting out in front of the front door, and that main stairway that provides access to the second floor is used by construction personnel. So the public would have no ability to access the fire administration. And so, with your permission, we moved the administration out. We moved over on Johnstown, and at the same time, the battalion chiefs were looking at, I asked them to look at the operational issues and see if we can't draw down the number of people stationed at the station, still provide excellent coverage, but make it easier on the contractor by having fewer people there, fewer trucks, and make the whole process work a little bit easier. And we were able to do that. They moved Rescue 1 and the medical officer down to Station 3 while this reconstruction is going on. And while they did that, that shifted all the apparatus around inside. And so as they were working on the second floor, you saw the second story go up. The bricks are up there now, and they're building interior walls. It became apparent to us that the whole area where the administration was is now vacated, and that it seemed reasonable that we could actually move ahead with rebuilding the administrative offices in this first phase, because originally it wasn't designed until later in the project to come about. And just by what fell into place, it made sense to bring it to you at this juncture and ask you to consider expanding the contract for Don Mars and DMA Associates for $46,000 to start the process of doing the construction drawings and moving forward with rebuilding the administrative offices ahead of schedule. But you know, with everything, there's an additional cost. The architectural fees are just part of it. We need to determine what the actual construction fees are going to be and bring that to you, and that's for a later commission meeting after Don gets the construction drawings done, because we've got to go to the contractor and deduct all of the things that he's not going to have to put back in there, because frankly the administration can't move back in there. There's issues with the building as far as electrical wiring and things of that nature that preclude us from moving back in. So as we worked on this project, Byron Erickson is here. Byron's been the job superintendent for the city, been in and out of the building. And the finances, Rod France, our own finance director, worked with Dawn in looking at the costs and what to project ahead for this project. But honestly, today, this item is just for the construction services contract for Don to go ahead and do the construction plans and things of that nature. He was here earlier, and he's not here now. He had a super critical thing he had to be to at 7:30, and I said, well, Donnie, I'll carry it on for you and present it to the commission. If I can't explain it, Rod can. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have. We tried to detail a lot of that by bulleted points in the blue sheet. And if not, I'll step back and let Rod talk to you about the timing and the finances and things of that nature. I'm not a finance man.
And Jason, you might have to sound in as well if needed, but we've talked about Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the fire station. And when we talked about Phase 1, we talked about not proceeding with it if Phase 2 wasn't going to be acceptable as well.
Yeah, what you did with, of course, Phase 1 is under contract for the construction. Phase 2 is in your capital improvement plan, and at this stage they have some preliminary design. I don't believe the preliminary design is fully completed, but is fairly close, if not completed, and that's the stage Phase 2 is. And what the chief is asking is, due to the inconvenience of needing to do the administrative office area and for them being out, if we bring that part of Phase 2 into this project, it would allow them to get back into the station much quicker. And then what would happen is that administrative office area would be taken out of Phase 2 when we, in the future, bid the rest of Phase 2, which is the addition of a bay and some other major aspects. So it's really the question is really the timing of bringing forward just the administrative office area out of Phase 2, bringing it into Phase 1. And before we know exactly how much that'll cost, we have some thoughts on that, but we need to have the preliminary engineering or architectural work completed, which is the item that you have in front of you, is to have Mr. Mars do that.
Okay, I understand that. For on this project, the way that it's being presented right now, my thoughts are twofold. One, for the life of me, I don't understand how we planned so much disruption and didn't plan doing the office work. That seems to just be a big breakdown in the area scope. But two, we're talking about a surprise in the order of nearly $100,000 in just the wiring, and I know that you're not going to find every piece of wiring, and you might get into a situation between a panel and a junction box where you're like, for some reason they changed something here, but this is speaking to the wiring in the entire area, which doesn't seem like it was looked at beforehand when our project scope and costs were put together. That's a substantial cost item.
Yeah, $85,000. I mean, I'm with you. I'm thinking you could wire up every city building in town for $85,000. I mean, I'm no electrician, but I wire a lot of stuff.
These two things to me just feel like large misses on serving the city's needs on this project, both with the cost estimating and financial part, and then the time frame and operational part.
Two aspects are scope aspects, and quite honestly, because we were focused on Phase 1 and hadn't gotten that far into Phase 2, the final configuration for Phase 2 wasn't yet finalized, just because of the timing of that. Those two aspects is the ceiling. There was a presumption before, without knowledge of any wiring issues, that the walls in that area would stay in the same place, that there'd be some above ceiling work, and then flooring, in essence. And what they found is that as they got into it, there needs to reconfigure that space, which means you move wires a little bit, or move walls, I'm sorry, some. There was the determination after they got into the walls and looked and said, hey, the wiring is not in conduit as it's supposed to be. That goes back, we believe, many, many years, but nonetheless, it is what it is. I can't, quite honestly, I don't know that I can say whether or not that should have been found before or not. I'm pretty critical of that type of thing. I'd like to think it should have, but I don't know. And then the other is at that point, The ceilings are like 7 feet, roughly 7 feet, and if you're going to do above ceiling anyway, it's best probably, there's an opportunity to put it at roughly about an 8 foot, a normal height ceiling. So all three of those do come into play in the final change order. I can't necessarily speak to the dollars attributed just to the wiring, but together, that's where your number, and it's an estimate at this point, but that's where that comes from.
And I can take the burden back on myself and say that I thought it was an entire plan, and when we sat as a commission last time and talked about it, that's what we talked about, is the nature of the entire addressing of one, and whether it was geographically right, and there was discussion about apparatus bay, and if we weren't going to do that down the road, then maybe it didn't make sense to do phase one, and all of these things together as kind of the big overall plan. But then now it kind of feels like we had a lot of drawings and everything presented by the architect and discussions on all of the phase one and phase two conceptual, but it didn't seem like it was ever gelled together by that person.
To be honest with you, originally I'm not sure it was. I don't know that preliminary design was far enough along to get the full feedback from the staff on the configuration questions, and then they just, I think, figured out the wire issue in the last couple of weeks or 3 weeks. I'm not sure the exact timing of that. So some of this stuff has just come to their attention right now and wasn't known at that time. Again, whether it should have been is a whole other question, but it wasn't at the time that you went under contract with phase one.
Yeah, when we initially talked about that, I think that everybody was looking forward to doing both phases, or if we had a total dollar figure, it looked like it might all work together at that night. But honestly, we were so focused, the fire administration at least was so focused on trying to get everything on the second floor the way it needed to be in that first phase. We did not look at that second phase that close. We just had conceptual. We had ideas. We were not that far along because we knew we were going to have to come back in there. We were going to have to go in and redo the restrooms downstairs. We knew that. We were going to have to go back in there and address some of the issues with apparatus bays on down the road, expand those offices out. So we knew that was going to come. It's just unfortunate. And like I said, like Jason was just saying, the $85,000 is an architect's estimate, and at this point, we don't have any hard dollar figures to go on right now, I don't think. But maybe, Byron, do you have anything to add to the discussion about what precipitated the need for
the movement forward?
Yeah, for it makes things work a whole lot easier. I know if they can move right into doing the offices as they tear it out, because originally they were going to tear it out, put some things back, we were going to move back in, and then they were going to look at phase two, and then what didn't make sense is that they were going to tear out some of the things they had just put back in.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Byron Erickson, Facility Superintendent for the city. I'm working with the contractors on a daily basis, checking to see that we're getting what we're paying for and that things are going in properly. What we found was, as we were starting to take some of the drop ceiling apart to be able to put up the new heating system, that there was another ceiling above it, which nobody had realized. And as we got into that, we found that all of that had, at one point in the past, and we don't know who and when, the drop ceiling and the lights had been installed and the system had been rewired with Romex plastic-coated wiring. No conduit or anything was used. So we knew that could not go back because that does not meet city code. And we started looking at the ceiling, and if that plaster ceiling came down, instead of having a 7-foot ceiling throughout their area, they could be back into an 8-foot height ceiling, which would be an advantage. To do that, that plaster would have to come down. It would be a real mess. They were out of the building now. If we could find a way to move the work forward, we could do that work, have the space ready for them, get it redesigned and have it done, and they would only be out of the building one time. If we continued with our other plan, which we originally thought, without having found these other factors, they would have moved back into the building, and then they would have had to move out again. The other part was, we have a blueprint, and we were going to put the heating and air conditioning in the ceilings as designed with the original rooms. as we looked at that, we realized if we redesign and gave them the facility that they need, we would end up putting in some different rooms. It would be reconfigured, which means we would take out what we had all just got through putting in, and we could reuse the same equipment, but we'd have to pay the labor and the materials to relocate it.
Yep.
And that seemed like a waste of money.
Yeah, thank you. That just makes the point. Our architect didn't look above a drop ceiling.
Yeah, that's
I agree with this project. I think it's wise to do it now. I think those that we relied on to lead us in this process and to try to make sense of it towards the commission on time frame and when we should do what we should do for disruptability and economics and all of those things just kind of seemed to treat it like it was a facility as large as this. And these are all separate pieces, but it's such a small piece. They all so interact with each other, and it's I don't think it's a full staff responsibility on this. So that might appear a little bit harsh, but that was what I wanted to say about the project. I just wish that it would have been done differently, and it wasn't. So maybe there's wisdom that we can grab on future projects like this to tie it all together.
Yeah, I'm not as willing to be forgiven myself. I mean, I'm a professional. I get paid to do a professional job. People have expectations from me. I'm not an architect. But I think for something the scope of this project, the fact that they didn't go up in the ceiling and look around, you're exactly right. It's not that big of a building. Why the hell weren't there people up there looking around you're redesigning a building, you don't even know what the structure is? How long would it take to walk over there and look through that thing, lift up the ceiling, look up there and go, huh, there's some wires going up inside there. I wonder what that is. Oh, there's another ceiling. I mean, this is a guy, we're talking about redesign work here. Let me get this right. This is just to revise the plans for the whole Phase 2 or just the offices part?
Just the office.
$46,000. I'll give them $4,500. $46,000 to redesign some offices? I'm no architect, but I think you could hire some pretty high-dollar architects for $46,000. That seems like a heck of a lot of money. I mean, it must be great to get city contracts. That just seems outrageous. And then we're giving $46,000 to the guy who wouldn't go up in the ceiling and look around and see what's up above? I'm real concerned about that. I think it's easy for us to sit up here and just vote yes and say, I mean, I agree. I think remodeling the fire station is a great idea. But I'm a little concerned now that I'm seeing things that should have been caught I mean, what was the initial architectural fees? Was that 200 and some? I mean, how was this not caught? This guy's a professional. I mean, I feel like we're getting the people that designed the Hyatt Regency here. I mean, seriously, this is ridiculous that we spend that kind of money and they don't even know what's up there.
Does anybody here have the overall architectural fee for Phase 1? To know what type of an increase this is in the overall architectural service?
Yeah, Commissioners, on the second page of your report, under fiscal note, talks about Phase 1 being under construction, and the Phase 1 architectural and engineering cost is $199,000.
Okay, and this would be the architectural and engineering work required for just the office areas, mechanical, electrical, structural.
Yes, and I need to ask a question to Mr. Erickson or Mr. Franz to make sure I'm clarifying the scope of this too, because the office area is really kind of divided into sort of somewhat three areas. There's the furthest east area, which is the area of most of the reconfiguration, well, the change in the configuration, let me put it that way. There's the central area, and then it's kind of divided into two. And the change order for the architectural fees that we're talking about, is that for all of those areas?
Yes.
It is. It's not just limited to the east area where we found the wiring.
No. It's
Yeah.
for
Okay.
all
So
of the existing.
I'm not saying it's still where you'd want it to be. I just want to make sure everyone knows what area that's being applied
it
to.
just, when I put it together in my head and I take that lower east portion, front to back, that's our office areas, right? That's what we're talking about, next to Bay 1 from south to north. And then I look at that relative to the entire upstairs and all of the structural work to add on everything outside on the second story, and all of that being $200,000. I would agree with Commissioner Householder that $45,000 seems a bit out of line compared to all of the rest of that scope of work that's going on architecturally and engineering-wise. And if there's enough uncomfort, I guess I would ask, is delaying this action, we don't have a meeting next week, but is delaying this action going to hold the project up? Is it going to create a jeopardy with current Phase 1 work in any way?
And the thought being, Commissioners, that if we did delay, that we would try to negotiate a different fee, lower fee for that work, presumably?
I don't know about a fee. I don't know if I have any confidence in this guy. I'm serious. I mean,
well,
I work a hell of a lot harder to make $100,000 than this guy does. And I'm just, my customers don't have to call me back a month later because I've forgotten something. And I just have a hard time looking at this amount of money and thinking, how do you miss this? What's the incompetence level of this guy?
I understand that, and I will say, with our projects in the past, Mr. Mars has done a very good job.
Has
he?
The
problem is, yeah, he has. The problem is I don't know that without him being here to answer the questions, I'm not sure we're suited to answer those questions for him that well.
I agree.
And so I don't want to do that, but I would ask for your question, Mayor, to Byron and Larry, do we believe that 2 weeks is adequate with regards to project timeline to talk with Mr. Mars and possibly renegotiate that fee?
I feel the commission can do, by all means, whatever.
Does it affect the timeline of the construction project to a point that they're at a standstill and have to actually stop?
It can be done. It would be better construction-wise if it proceeded. However, we can make anything work.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think getting everybody out there and doing it one time is a smart move. I mean, I completely agree. And spending money again, but these numbers and the quality of work we seem to be getting for it just are not agreeable with me. I mean, I appreciate you guys' diligence looking at it, and I'm sorry if I'm mad and I'm screaming. I'm not mad at you guys, of course, and you're doing your job, and you're thinking, hey, this is a great idea. Let's fix it and let's move along, and it's more efficient. That's fine, but I think had there been a little more diligence up front on the part of the architect, we wouldn't be facing this. We would have known this up front. We would have been given a proper plan, and that's my concern is like, now we got to go forward with this thing? I just, my comfort level is, I mean, that's fine if you guys want to put it out to and listen to him, but at this point, I have no confidence in this guy at all. And I really don't even feel like spending $46,000 with him. I'm happy to put that out to bid for somebody else. I don't care if it slows the process down or not. Don't want this building coming down on us.
Commissioners, let me suggest then that we, if that's the will of the whole commission, that we go and negotiate the number with the architect, that no action be taken on this today, and then that we bring this back. We will check with you to determine, based on the timeline, if we need a special meeting or somehow can expedite and hopefully not interfere with your schedules in the meantime, if in fact waiting to the 28th is too long with regards to the timing of the construction. Does that work? Does that work, Greg? Right, because it's not an official postponement, because I don't have an exact date for sure if we thought we could accelerate it. So I want to make sure we're comfortable with just no action and then to accept the direction to tell us to go back and negotiate and then work with you on rescheduling.
Yes. Yes, I would say that we would direct staff to go back and renegotiate.
Okay. We will clearly communicate the disappointment as well. Okay. So make sure you know that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your consideration. It's going to be, in the end, regardless of the highs and lows we get, it'll be a good project for the community, and I appreciate your support.
I know, thank you. And I know it will be too. I mean, I've got to be concerned about the taxpayers' dollars and if they're getting the best value for it.
Thank you. So, are there any motions on this item?
Do we need to motion that to table it?
No. It would move on for the lack of a motion.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're clear on your agreement to have us go back, renegotiate, and then work with you on rescheduling. So no action on it.
Seeing none, we'll move on.
This time, I move to recess into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters. Reconvene at 7:18.
Second.
Motion and a second to move into executive session for 20 minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 4-0. Do we expect any action?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
Support for